We are live. This is the market update. Congratulations to Uncle Sugar on $37 trillion in debt. Want to know what that means for crypto? Stay right here. Want to know what that means for banks in Switzerland? Stay right here. I like my sugar with coffee and cream. Uncle Sugar. I swear to God, if Bitcoin, somebody wrote an article, Bitcoin could go to like 93. I actually have that on a Gantt chart. That would be just, that literally, well, excuse me. That would be a good buy. It would not be Christmas because I can tell you, and I'm going to say it, the political commentators are too chicken to say it. We just figured it out before the stream. I'm going to say how this is probably going to end. There's two choices. The thing overseas. You don't want to go anywhere. You don't want to miss that. But before I just go all out here, we want to welcome Ben from Down Under, Warmon, MJ Hits, Zav, the original, SGSG, Miguel, Thomas, Malik, and Blown Ideas. Okay. So let's talk about, So Uncle Sugar has gone to $37 trillion in debt. That is double what it was in 2010. So between cough, cold, and flu, and the Brandon Printathon, here we are, 37T. And Uncle Sugar is scrambling with stablecoins and bank regulations and you name it to try to find any liquidity for our government bonds. Because we obviously can't stop spending. And, this gigantic geopolitical distraction, gets you looking in the opposite direction from the fight on the streets of Los Angeles and the big, beautiful bill, which is now laughable compared to what we got going on right now. So again, congratulations to Uncle Sugar. 51% of Gen Z job seekers believe their degrees were a waste of money per Indeed. My heart goes out to Gen Z, right? Born into 9/11, watched their parents suffer through the great financial crisis, probably saw their parents get divorced. Okay. Then they get hit with hyperinflation. This will be the crypto generation. My generation will get these kids into it, and these kids will run with the ball and wind up the greatest generation in American history because they will be the crypto generation. Like Gen Z will save themselves, and Gen Z may wind up saving their parents as well, assuming they're still talking. It's a Gen Z thing. I understand. Okay, so Trump allegedly ended Brandon inflation, probably with the tariff tantrum cooling off capital markets temporarily. Prices will never go down. And he says because the Fed will never allow it. Yeah, okay, we'll never stop printing money, but even when we are printing money or we're not, doesn't matter. Prices never go back down. They just don't. Now that's because of the Fed and whatnot. But, just because inflation is 1% or zero, they're trying to tell you it's zero in Europe. Everybody in Europe raised their hand if they think inflation is 0%. Just saying. Okay, let's have a conversation about Switzerland. We have a research revision going on. So the Swiss National Bank, the Fed of Switzerland, which, by the way, is a U.S. equities hedge fund, and I'm not kidding about that. They just cut rates to zero. Okay. Now, my original thinking is everyone is flooding into the Swiss franc, which they are. So there's such a flood into Swiss francs that everybody is like, hey, the price of money is now zero. And if you really want to buy a Swiss government bond Right. Well, you have to pay us to hold your money. And that's what I thought. That's what I thought. But then I read an article or I saw a tweet and I was like, wait a minute. Why do central banks lower rates to zero? Because there might be a massive problem at UBS. Whoever can read and understand a bank financial statement is worried. I'm working on a podcast on Switzerland that is more and more setting itself up in the same position as Iceland in 2008 with one difference. Switzerland is 10 times bigger, so the fallout could be massive. Now, what he's talking about here is there could be something wrong at UBS. So let's talk about 3 Swiss banks. That's what I grew up with. The first one was Swiss Bank Corp. That was the one I worked at. So UBS has a logo of the 3 keys. That came from Swiss Bank. That was an orderly merger. Then UBS was told by the Swiss National Bank and probably every other regulator on the planet that they were going to purchase Credit Suisse, which is the other Swiss bank. Credit Suisse is huge. They were big in investment banking and derivatives. And guess what? The reason UBS was forced to purchase Credit Suisse is because Credit Suisse was a disaster. They have art losses. They have derivatives losses. They have oil, gold, silver. I mean, they are wrong way everything. And of course, no one knows what the bugaboo really is. They just know that there's a problem. And when a central bank lowers rates to zero, it may not have anything to do with the price of money. It may have to do with admitting that there's actually a problem over there. Now, this guy is talking about being Iceland, and Just Dario, love the guy, but he never met an apocalypse or a crash that he didn't like. However, in 2008 in Iceland, the 3 big banks went bust, right? And they had the largest systemic banking collapse in history relative to the size of the economy. So get your money out of UBS. 1, not investment advice. 2, it is really hard to see how Bitcoin goes down with this kind of stuff going on. You know what I'm saying? Like, if that's even possible, right? If that's even possible. Because, if you have a geopolitical event, right? And we'll get to that. If you have a geopolitical event that creates big down moves or big gap moves either way, they call it some people call it a dislocation. If you want to get really fancy, the legacy word refers to like when statistics on quantitative models stop working, they call it a VAR shock. Okay. VAR is a term used slang for risk management. So you have a risk management shock. That's not out of the realm of the possibility, considering you have to figure out how this geopolitical situation ends. I will tell you my theory. And you also have to consider the idea of some kind of false flag, right? Somebody sets something up to try to draw us in. Both of those things could happen at some point, and the Orange Man has already said 2 weeks. First, it was 2 days, and now it's 2 weeks, and we'll talk about why. I'm just going to say it. Okay, so everything's really going well at banks. Goldman wants students to stop using ChatGPT in interviews. Guess they're not doing interviews in person anymore in the New York area. I mean, either. It's like Goldman should think about changing the interview if you got to use ChatGPT for the interview. Most of the time, it wasn't a quiz. Although I interviewed with Goldman as a kid, didn't get in. There was a train accident, and luckily I left 3 hours early because I barely made it on time. And the first question was, what's the square root of 24? not the square root of 25. What was the square root of 24? And, I just locked up. Who knew, right? I couldn't talk. Shocking. And I did make it. So they need to change the interview, right? For God's sakes. It's Goldman Sachs. Come on, man. Okay, let's get to Bitcoin. Bitcoin open interest. Normally when open interest and liquidity, when all things get quiet post-Fed, it's set up for a move. In my opinion, Bitcoin should be trying to go higher soon, right? It should. And if we got 2 weeks of geopolitical non-events where it's just a Twitter and TikTok light show, as sad as that is, the market does have room to go higher unless people figure out what I'm about to talk about. Okay, so, what is this? Billions of Bitcoin and Ethereum options expire today. So all the more reason for things to be very quiet. This is the biggest options expiration in the history of equities today. So normally these options, these bets that require timing, when time is up and the bets come off, the market is more free to move around. So let's hope we can get it going on the upside. Let's hope, right? Love Bitcoin Cash. Oh, love that. Sometimes when that goes up, though, when those coins like Litecoin outperforms, not always market positive, but it's a seasonal good GAN period. Okay, now we interrupt this crypto broadcast for an update on the apocalypse. So I've been saying this, and I completely agree with Mr. Jones that the guy that could go and eliminate this whole problem is the guy running Israel. Seriously. If they put a center-left government over there, this would probably stop immediately. Immediately. Now, they want the guy from Iran to quit. He's 86 years old. Why is he going to quit? Where's he going to go? Right? To an armored retirement home? He's not going anywhere. Okay. So that's what should happen, but that's not going to happen because, that guy has been in power for a long time. He's got a lot of enemies. He's in trouble. A lot of people think that this whole thing started when it started because he was going to get in trouble for corruption, whatever. Now, that said, you're probably wondering why I'm bringing this up. Let me go through a few more things and I'll tell you. Okay, so we're assuming this is a real picture. Okay. So a missile hit and we got a brush fire in front of a building. Okay, right? Everyone's got their photo of, oh my God. And I understand this is very unfortunate, obviously. But if this is all it is for 2 weeks, markets are going to ignore this and try to do something positive. They're going to try. Now, let's get real, shall we? So the Russians have 600 people in this power plant that's underground. The issue is there's a giant nuclear facility 300 feet under a stone mountain, and certain ordnance cannot take out this facility. Conventional ordnance cannot take out the facility. Okay. And Vladdy says, we're not leaving. Now, why would you put your people at risk? Why would you get stubborn about that? Why? Trying to prevent something? Check this out. We have planes that are undetectable flying around. No one's able to see them. Now, most people don't notice, but there was a famous TV show when I was in the 70s, Wonder Woman, and it was played by Linda Carter, who arguably is, just a fantastic individual if you catch my drift. She drove the invisible plane, and she says, I assure you, the invisible planes are not mine. That's point number 2. Here's point number 3. So a not so polite cartoon from overseas that we're going to end this crisis in a way that works for the orange man. Now, let's take a minute to review. We have invisible planes flying around. You cannot take out the facility with conventional ordnance. The orange man has said, we want a definitive end to this. And Tucker Carlson, in a theoretical example, asks the unlikable senator from Texas, Ted Cruz, about this rumor about, the Iranians coming after the orange man, which are ridiculous. But according to my sources, Tucker Carlson, whose father was in the intelligence community, said to Ted Cruz, what would you do if, you found out that the Iranians were trying to hurt one of our elected officials? And one of the two gentlemen said, I would nuke them. So you've been told. We need a definitive end. Vladdy's trying to deter it by keeping his scientists there. The orange man went from attacking him on Sunday to giving him 2 weeks. That means everyone's got 2 weeks to clear out. And if there's a false flag, did you hear the commandos story? Like, Israel's going to go in with commandos. Yeah. What are they going to go in with? A suitcase nuke to contaminate the place. Or we just dropped the one big, beautiful bomb. Right? Go back to this. Right? He's losing, remember we're tired of winning. No deal on the budget. All the tariffs expired. All the tariff delays expired. And he's going to have to backtrack out of all of that. Right? You got social disorder on the streets and the MAGA base is divided. How's it going? How's it going? Right? We got invisible planes flying around. Really? I think we knew that, didn't we? They're practically telling you that that's what they're going to do. They're practically telling you. Now, of course, we don't want that to happen. But let's just call that an insane outcome, because the political commentators have brought it up, but they don't want to predict it. And neither do I. But I do want to say that in crypto, it may pay to be patient. I mean, there is absolutely no reason to sell crypto. None. Zero. Government behavior, horrible. Banks, right? Big, beautiful bill. Yeah, there's nothing, there's no reason. So what could catch people off guard? Either the false flag or the false flag that leads to either that outcome or the threat of that outcome. Because the threat of that outcome would move oil, right? Nothing's going to move oil because no one wants to contemplate that outcome. However, it would be definitive. It would come from some stealth or commando operation. And again, it would be the end. Now, of course, that has long-term ramifications. And, if you look at what Putin has been saying, he said that, if we attack this nuclear facility, it could have, I don't know, something like catastrophic long-term ramifications. He was former KGB. He's not stupid. You know what I'm saying? They're not stupid. Right? So, no one's talking about it today, but they may be talking about it in 2 weeks. Because remember, the orange man gave them 60 days, and at 60 days and 5 minutes, Bibi launched on them. Do we have any reason to believe that that would change? So, crypto forever, but you probably got to leave a little bit of cash just in case something idiotic happens in 2 weeks. Because, the writing is clearly on the wall. I mean, I just went through 4 articles. Okay, so for more cheery stuff about crypto that you need to know, apparently, not only did the Iranians get hacked on crypto, But apparently the database at a certain bank disappeared. So I would strongly recommend printing your bank statement and getting the rent and putting it in a drawer, because the Iranians are capable on these things, but I don't think they want to be stupid and do something to draw us in. Because if I know about the big, beautiful bee, so do they. However, you cannot rule anything out, particularly a false flag. If the false flag is financial, that gets the American public angry. Because right now, I think the American public is definitely not in favor of this. That could change if the ATM doesn't work. So the Iranians now have some kind of exchange for crypto, a curfew. So like ding, ding, they open it up and everybody has to trade and that's it. Because they're afraid of getting hacked. We talked about yesterday how they're big into Bitcoin mining. Crypto Quant warns of, there's a divergence to 92K. And that's really interesting. How do we get there? Bitcoin spot demand momentum is the most negative on record. Interesting that no one is buying Bitcoin. It's like all markets have just come to an absolute stop. An absolute stop. Now, I mean, I don't know. Like when you get these things, it feels like it's a kind of it feels like a bottom when it happens. So maybe it never goes down. I think the only way it goes down is if you have a false flag or a bigger event. That's it. That's it. Right. I mean, they think it's going lower. Okay. On-chain data is debatable. The only way you would get that kind of move is if you had a VAR shock, right? Because with a VAR shock or, a bank or whatever, oil, you name it, right? The funds sell everything, right? The model goes, oh my God, shock, 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 sell. And everyone sells at the market. That's the futures hand signal for the market. That's the only way it would happen, right? So you got to leave a little cash available, just a little. Okay, so Uncle Sugar, Thomas Lee from Litecoin. 37T is 15 times larger than the current stablecoin market. 25% of Ethereum network fees today are for Circle. 15x rise is exponential growth in ETH usage. ETH is a direct beneficiary of the Genius Act. ETH at 2,500. I mean, ETH's going to 10,000. Banks want to move money on a reliable network. Now, can ETH do this? Layer 2s? I don't know. I don't know the technical details. However, again, 15x the supply of stablecoins. That's got to be ETH. That's got to be Solana. I'm guessing SUI and XRP Ledger, and I'm sure there'll be a couple of dark horse layer 1s. Some layer 1s are already popping. I'm watching a couple of them. I don't know how to pronounce them, but there are layer 1s that are moving off this. Okay. Again, congratulations. Just remember, right, what I said yesterday. The stable coins allow the Fed to create money and the Treasury to create money, because the money is created by the Treasury by, issuing debt to the stable coin users. Debt becomes money. The Fed just prints money, right? So two printing presses. Two. Okay, XRP buyers, are supposedly selling. This is interesting and shocking and wonderful at the same time, because I want to say that the chairman, Chris Larson, has $2 billion in XRP. Okay, his stash is worth $5 billion. All right, and then somewhere in here are the XRP tokens held in escrow. Right? So Ripple as a company locked up most of its balance in 2017, releasing 1 billion tokens each month. Notably, due to their large holdings, Ripple and Chris Larson stand to benefit tremendously if the XRP skyrockets to greater heights. Okay, so naturally, this is what the Bitcoin people use to argue that, XRP is extremely centralized, right? I mean, control is literally in the hands of a couple guys. However, after what happened to Circle, which the Circle IPO going up, 500%, literally 500%. If a tech company bought XRP, they could do like what Michael Saylor has done with one wave of the wand, because not only would they get Ripple, but they would get this huge chunk of the supply and wouldn't have to go into the open market to buy it all. Now, I'm sure that would result in a large move in XRP, but you can't have XRP, say, in your metaverse or on your platform, or, use it as payment on Amazon unless you have a huge chunk of the supply. So, yeah, it's centralized, but, it's a perfect takeover target. The value of Circle, 5x'd. Thank you for coming in. That means, Circle went from, went from like 6 billion to 30 billion. I don't know exactly what Circle is worth. What is the market cap of Circle, the stable coin company, as of 6/19/2025? Let's see what Circle is worth. $48 billion. Ripple tried to buy Circle for $6 billion. So, yeah, they took it to 48. I'm guessing that means at Ripple. I think Ripple could go for more, because you get a cryptocurrency and a layer one and a company that, that's been there. So, yeah, watch out. Watch out for that. Right. That's the positive surprise. That's the shocker on the upside. I mean, that would ignite alt season for sure, because then everyone's got to wake up. Oh, wow, you can do stable coins on ETH. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't matter until it does. Circle goes up 500%. A lot of investment banks, BlackRock, all these guys, you knew it was going to happen. I mean, BlackRock bought 20% of the IPO, for God's sakes. You knew it was going to happen. Absolutely knew it was going to happen. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Vladdy says regime change is unacceptable. Yeah, the guy who paved a whole country in Eastern Europe to get regime change now thinks it's unacceptable. Okay, bro. Okay. So Solana is one of the two coins currently closest to receiving ETF approval. So can you imagine a Ripple takeover? The Solana ETF, and a legacy problem at the same time. Oh, now that could be July, that could be December, but there are multiple huge catalysts in crypto. Huge. This says nothing about any AI agent doing something that's like, ooh, like a DeepSeek moment in crypto. That could also happen. Somebody's moving the money around with Bitcoin Cash. Do you want to stop people getting hurt? Stop funding the tyrants. Very rebellious. The Roger Ver meme coin hitting $500. That's probably it for now. But if it's not, wow. Okay. Don't want to get too giddy, because when you get giddy and you have the lampshade on your head, long-term viewers know what that means, right? Especially when you get the big splashy headline and there's no explanation whatsoever. This is like it came from a freaking chatbot. Right? Tell me why crypto is up. Boom. There's no reason yet. There's got to be foreign actors moving money around on a blockchain no one's looking at, supposedly, right? Okay, so I hate this. I like this guy, but I hate this, right? Wealthy individuals are making outrageous Bitcoin predictions, right? 1,400,000. Bitcoin has no top. Never say something has no top. That is like, if you go down the bubble checklist, The number one reason you have a bubble is people say there is no top. I'm sure that does not apply to Bitcoin, or if it does, it's because there's a surprise, right? In other words, quiet price action can make people complacent and leave them, leave the market exposed to some sort of whatever that is. I mean, we do not have 4 aircraft carriers out there to just walk off into the night. There's something is going to happen. If it's a complete nothing burger, then Bitcoin's going to go straight up, obviously. Or it could be alt season, because again, there are all of these stablecoin catalysts that we're not paying attention to because we're too busy watching, fireworks on TikTok. Meanwhile, back at the Grift Ranch, Tron flips Doge. Tron is on the move. And there's talk of Tron season from James Wynn. No transaction cost. The Solana killer. ETH is no good. Right? Fully backing Tron. Buys a huge share of the Orange Man's meme coin and World Liberty Financial. Next thing you know, a guy who couldn't get in the front door of an investment bank is all of a sudden going public. Tron is going public. Now that's great. That's great. You know why it's great? Because if Tron goes public and that IPO goes up, oh my God, you're just compounding the value. A consensus from Ethereum could go public. All the exchanges, right? I've seen these manias. It starts with something like Circle. You have a 500% ramp in Circle. That's the innovator, right? So you're going to have multiple innovators. Then you're going to have imitators. Then you'll have idiots. That could be well into 2026 by the time the idiots get IPO. I mean, this is going to be a huge trade. And there's going to be mergers and acquisition because somebody's going to go public and then take the money and buy a Bitcoin miner. I think that's what Circle should do. Circle's got all this money now. They're like, oh my God, I don't know how much of that stock that they have that they can sell, but oh my God, right? It's like, buy Bitcoin or buy a Bitcoin miner. I don't know. Okay. No, this is what I want. Okay, so Bitcoin Cash on a 4-hour chart. As you can see, we're pretty much watching paint dry here. This was supposed to be the top. This was supposed to be the blow-off top. And then the blow-off top had a blow-off top. So we had an overshoot and then an overshoot and then an overshoot of the overshoot. Wow. Again, someone's probably moving money around. You won't find out until later. Again, they had to get money out of that country. They had to somehow. Right? Bitcoin, this feels like bid only. This feels like it wants to go back to 110. Right? And, if, everybody is afraid of the weekend because markets are closed. So that's normally when the Putins and the, let's call it the BRICS countries of the world, they get active. Okay. So if everyone's afraid of the weekend, of course, crypto is going to go up all weekend. That's kind of how it works, right? I think the general thought process is patience is going to be required. Don't sell support and don't buy resistance. So they've been boring you down here enough to where this could rotate back up easily, right? ETH is another example. Like this 2400 area is like a parking lot. Maybe you could get a pop, but again, this is really like a trading market. And I don't know how much of this we're in for, right? Range trading begets more range trading. This, I still just can't believe. I just marvel at it. It's like Agent Smith in the Matrix, right? Would you look at this thing? Don't you just marvel at it? I can't get the stink off of me. That's the stock market. I mean, it's like unbelievable, right? Where this thing actually is. I mean, again, whatever's going on in Silicon Valley, the AI related FOMO, holy cow. I mean, just from a contrarian point of view, right? Millions of dollars, billions of dollars getting thrown around indiscriminately with Microsoft laying people off. Like 8,000 people. What? It's going so good? Oh, 8,000 people. I don't know, man. Stinks. Smells like massive asset allocation into crypto, even if it's just a small dip. Right? Why do you think BlackRock is buying all the Ethereum on the planet? This would be why. Now, if we go to Bitcoin, right? Okay. So if we go to Bitcoin, GAN support is now at 101. So I was thinking 99, but maybe the range is 101 to as high as 119 looking with GAN. Okay. That's your range. Now, in the event that there's a gap move, which is probably what Crypto Quant is thinking, the 200-day moving average in equilibrium is at 93 if there's some kind of radical idiotic event. Everyone says, oh, yeah, that 93, man, that's going to sound great. I don't want it to go down there. I don't want any of what I said to be true. I want this whole thing to just fizzle out, the orange man to go taco, Trump always caves, turn everything around, and let them shoot at each other for the rest of their lives if that's what they want. But hopefully this just goes away. Right now, I don't see that happening. 119, 101, or 103, and 93 are the levels. That's it. I mean, again, the only way Bitcoin's ever going to go down is if there's an event, right? Look at this. What do you know? The Federal Reserve said they could cut rates in July. Wow, what's up with the sudden reversal? 2-week deadline with invisible Wonder Woman planes, Vladdy having a fit, and the Fed is all of a sudden going to say, you know what, don't worry, we'll cut rates in July. Okay. Now, that could be a problem with UBS, too. That there could be something wrong. This is an announcement that something out there, something is wrong. Something is wrong. We don't know what, right? But, Swiss cut rates to 0. Fed goes, we'll cut rates in July. Okay. What do you boys got going on? Short silver, short oil, short gold. What do you got? D, all of the above. Men behaving badly. If I wrote the history of Wall Street, that is exactly what I would call it. Men behaving badly, right? It's called moral hazard. You don't have to do anything right. You can take as much risk as you want because you got the printer right behind you. Right behind you. Same part of Wall Street. It's all right down there. Right? And the thing that's funny is Uncle Sugar is trying to get the banks to keep less cash on hand for a shock so they can buy more government debt. So Uncle Sugar's like, yeah, can you give us that? Can you buy government debt with that money? And then all of a sudden, UBS or whatever. Yeah, I mean, folks, this is not me making stuff up, right? This is a headline, right? Rates to 0. We'll cut rates out of nowhere, right? Invisible planes, 2-week deadline, right? Definitely going to be a false flag. I can't believe they're not going to line all this up and just not do anything with it. Something is going to happen. And then, like I said, if the orange man gets hot under the collar, right? Yeah, you got to watch out because, remember we were supposed to be we're going to be tired of winning. Yeah, he hasn't gotten a win and he couldn't get a deal done in Eastern Europe because no one's taking him seriously. And how do you get taken seriously? Shock value, right? Okay. So here's what you're going to do. Make 401k adjustments with stonks, not investment advice. I mean, seriously, like stonks have to be moved like into crypto related or gold related equities. You know, it's a chunk of that, right? Remember that guy, 50 stonks, 30 Bitcoin, 20 other. Okay. 20 other, I don't know. That could be government securities, treasury bills. I don't know. Right. If you got 30 Bitcoin already, maybe your 20 other is Ethereum, or like I said, MicroStrategy or something like that. Asset allocation. 1, 2, some crypto, some cash on hand, even if you have to dump positions that are no good, especially if you get a rally in positions that may be no good, have some cash in case something stupid happens. And again, we'll talk about it as we go on, but you know, I can't believe that it's this obvious and people are not figuring this out. Right. And if we ever saw 93 on a definitive end, right? Or a definitive end that was quiet, right? If it was a quiet definitive end, you know, you would want to have money to jump into, you know, whatever starts moving, right? It could be Tron or SUI. You know, this whole stablecoin trade has not been done. So, you know, getting out of stuff that's no good and having, some ammo ready. All right, that's the market update for today. We will see you on Monday.